Anyway, well, thank you. So we have a great crowd. How many non-MDs, non-medical students, how many other sort of administrators?
If I need to get up, I'll do it. How are you? Tomas.
That's helpful, and I think, again, part of what we really want to do here is create the interaction, and hopefully you can exchange stuff, your addresses and stuff like that, because it really is about, the interaction that we want to create, both with LPOC as well as with each other, because we know you're all very busy in your daily lives, and so one good way is to create a contact place electronically, so that we can continue these the conversations even beyond LPOC. So thank you. So I wanted to turn it over. I have a great panel, and my job now is to introduce Dr. Lisa Montes from Kaiser Permanente. She's a pediatrician. She's been very involved in Mentor and some of the mentorship programs. And she's going to be the moderator to lead our next discussion, which I think, again, is going to be very, very important for all of us. So, Dr. Montes?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, my name is Dr. Lisa Montes, and I'm a pediatrician from Pomona. There are not many of us. Okay, I am a physician pediatrician from Pomona, and I'm a Latina. So, I had very big dreams as a child, and I had big failures. I did not match for residency. Okay, so, but it's with these experiences that allow me to reconnect with the younger group of students that are struggling. Okay. So I'm the moderator, and this is the first time I've been a moderator, so it might be a little bit, hopefully more interactive. I'm going to try to make this session into more like a breakout session. So this is our breakout session, and it is a large breakout session because it's the most popular breakout session for the conference. Okay. But my job is to keep these habits on time and move them along, make them share the mic. But let me start by reading something that I found in my childhood box. Okay, you all have a childhood box, and it's a letter entitled Stress Journal 1993. This was my first year of medical school at USC San Diego. Now I typed it because I cannot read my writing, but this is what I wrote. Life's experiences run in parallel with nature. As I enter my second quarter of medical school, I'm experiencing many emotions. Knowing that my future is very challenging, I am not fearful of failing because I know that there are people that will hand me a pillow and dust me off. So today, I am proud to say that I have my dream job working for Kaiser Permanente. And thanks to the mentorship and all the leaders that came before me to put me in this position. And today, we actually have a surprise guest. Again, I'm full of surprises. It's a future pediatrician from Huntington Park. Okay, her name is Sophia Achi. Can you come up here? Come up here for a second. Sophia is a high school student. She goes to Southgate High School, and we just met today. She did something remarkable. She is a Kaiser Permanente patient, and she asked her pediatrician, "What did you do? How did you become a doctor? Like, what math did you take?" Her pediatrician happens to be my husband, Dr. Michael Tan, who works in Cudahy. We have a Cudahy proud physician here today. She asked him that, and he was blown away. He's known her since she was a baby. And he knows how responsible she is and how smart she is. And he told her to contact me because he knows that I do mentorship. So he gave her my card. And so she did a second remarkable thing. She contacted me. Okay? 2 things. It takes a lot. I mean, she's probably shaking up here. To do that, it's just amazing to me. So I reached out and I said, "I'm going to take you somewhere. I'm going to take you to the LPOC Symposium. She's like, what is that? She had no idea. This is the first time that she's ever gone to a medical conference. And I said, you know what, this one's going to be really special. Have you ever seen so many Latino physicians and healthcare providers in one room? Okay, you're going to see this more often, okay? So she's going to shadow me today, and she's going to maybe she might run to the back and grab questions. I'm going to let you help me, and these other guys will help us with the mic to get questions for you guys today. And also, we have, come on over here, we have some Halloween candy, so anyone who has a really great question, Sophia's going to give you candy in exchange for your card, okay? So when she comes around and you want candy, you have to give her your card. Okay, so Sophia, you come over here. All right, great. All right, so I want you to prepare your questions now as we get into this mentorship panel. And I'm going to start off by introducing this wonderful panel, and then I'm going to kick it off with a good question, and then second, and we're going to go down the wonderful group of panelists. I'm going to start introducing Dr. Moreno. He is an assistant professor in family medicine at UCLA and is the executive director of the UCLA Prime program. Sophia, listen to this. He received his medical degree from UCLA and completed his residency training in family practice at the University of San Francisco. Then he went on to complete a Master's of Science in Health Services from UCLA Public Health and completed a postdoctoral research fellowship with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Clinical Scholars Program, again at UCLA. Dr. Talamantes currently is, if you don't know where he's at, I'm going to tell you right now, he's the Associate Director for the Center for Reducing Health Disparities and the Associate Program Director for Internal Medicine Residency Program at UC Davis. He seems to be bouncing back from UCLA to UC Davis to UCLA to UC Davis. He received his medical degree at UCLA, completed his internal medicine residency at UC Davis, and then returned to UCLA and completed the Robert Wood Johnson Clinical Scholars Fellowship, and then had a master's in public health and management at the Fielding School of Public Health at UCLA. Then somehow, I don't know when you did this, he also managed to achieve a master's degree in business administration with focus on organization and management at the Emory University Goizueta School of Business in Atlanta, Georgia. So I currently text him constantly about Alliance and Mentorship, which is the nonprofit umbrella organization that he founded. And that is creating mentoring opportunities using innovative online technologies. From Alliance and Mentorship sprung Mi Mentor, and that was in 2014. This is an online and program-rich student-run movement to continue the development and the innovation of meaningful mentorship opportunities. Okay, Dr. Magana, he received his undergrad degree from Cornell, very far. You can go far too. Okay. And his master's degree in endocrinology from UC Berkeley, and his medical degree from UC San Francisco. He completed his pediatric residency at UC San Francisco. Currently, he's an assistant professor and medical director at the Samuel Merritt University, which is a private university in Oakland, whose mission, which is fantastic, is to educate students to become highly skilled and compassionate healthcare professionals. This is a university that includes training PAs, nurses, OT, PT. He is the lead pediatrician at La Clínica de la Raza, which has over 45 years of experience serving the communities in Alameda, Contra Costa, and Solano counties. He maintains his assistant professorship still at UC San Francisco and is the founding founding director of FACES for the Future Coalition, which really tugs at my heart. FACES programs address full context of a student's life, providing academic support, case management and mentoring, and youth leadership development. Started in 2000, the original Faces for the Future program was launched at Children's Hospital Oakland with collaboration of the public health system. And now it has sprung out into something called CHAMPS, which is the best practice model for youth workforce here in California. So with that, we have a wealth of information here. I'm really excited. I want to thank you all for being here. Many of you flew, and we got to drive. I'm going to start with Dr. Malagana.
Yes.
Okay, and we're going to start things off. Get right into the nitty-gritty of how we're going to sustain what we do. Okay. So the question is, what kind of investments do we need to have or make in our educational or in our medical or community health system to enhance all of these mentoring opportunities in our students? How are you doing that, or what do you envision we need to go?
All right. Is this a mic here, or do I just speak loud? Can you hear me?
That's just going to the camera.
That's just going to the camera. Can you all hear me, or do I need this?
Yeah,
Okay. Good morning, everybody. It is a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate that. I am the other pediatrician in the house, and I'm an adolescent medicine doctor. So the focus of my practice for the past several years has really been on the 11 to 24 year age range. As we know, it's often one of the most marginalized segments of our community, and certainly the pediatric community. And the reality in which I work is one of really truly at-risk youth. I've worked in the juvenile justice system, in the corridors of East and West Oakland, in the school-based health centers, and I interplay a lot with the educational systems in terms of our pipeline work. So, there's a real personal investment I have in these young people because of the risks and the challenges which they face. Now, before we even talk about this notion of investment, I think it's important that we even have some, as we talked earlier, some unified agreement of where we even start the investment. And it seems that we're kind of still all over the place in terms of where we really start in terms of this process. And I was a little dismayed to see in the survey that there was a percentage of physicians who felt that mentoring at the high school level really was not a priority. And I think that's very short-minded and very short-sighted. Let's take into account the fact that there are major philanthropic organizations like the California Endowment, the California Wellness Foundation, as well as federal agencies like the OMH that are clearly saying investment down the pipeline is of critical importance to build our workforce. Because if we really start further upstream, we are already losing a huge segment of our diverse population for a number of reasons, which are frankly about social determinants. Now, the unique thing I have about being an adolescent is I'm an adolescent.
You're still an
I'm still an adolescent. See, I'm so united with them. So
are we.
So good. Then we're on the good group, because if I start talking street, then here we go. I have a particular advantage in the fact that I can make adjustments in behaviors at the adolescent level. We all know that unhealthy adult behavior start at what point in our developmental process? Where? Adolescence. Adolescence, right? Smoking, high-risk behaviors, drug behaviors, and so on and so forth. So we always say, right, given the kind of the cognitive development of teenagers, which is very plastic and very receptive to interventions, let's start our interventions there so that we can make a difference in terms of adult outcomes. And that has been proven to be true, right? And so it does it not make sense that when we're talking about academic disparity, right, psychosocial challenges that determine outcomes as an adult, why not start at the young level? Young people are very challenged by a number of issues in their communities, right? There are a number of social determinants which are affecting academic disparities. And we know that academic disparity goes in par with health outcomes. Poverty, absenteeism, truancy, poor high school rates, and so forth have a direct impact on health. Well, the truth is that back in 2000, when we were developing this program, the pipeline program at Children's Hospital Oakland, we were facing a 40% graduation rate in the Oakland public schools. And the vast majority of those young people who were not graduating from high school were African American and Latino youth, and particularly young men of color, right? So we were already losing a significant portion of our representation with regard to our community at the high school level, let alone the number of young people who were not even getting to the high school level because they were dropping out at the middle school level. So we knew that if we were going to make an impact in changing the diversity that was coming into the pool, we had to start early as possible. And we had to do it in partnership. Mentorship alone was insufficient. Because if you look, what are the factors which are affecting the decisions of young people to stay in school and their own values, right, and their own self-efficacy, it's very, very complicated. There's a lot of community messages, family messages, cultural messages, which are keeping kids down. And so it requires very much a collective impact approach in terms of our intervention. So we met over a year with the various stakeholders in our community. I, as our hospital representative partner, because I said I want to bring the hospital to the community to provide job shadowing learning experiences for these youth. But please advise me, educators, CBOs, parents, and youth themselves, how do we do this most comprehensively and holistically to really address the determinants which are keeping young people down? And that took about a year to really kind of come to that. And there are four core components that kind of came out of that discussion. Some of them are the classic school to career, right? Job shadowing, health exposure, health training, which is lovely. Often historically has only catered to a certain type of young person who's doing very well in school, has the family support, and has the resources. That's great. These are all the different jobs you can be in healthcare, including the doctor 8 to 10 years down the line. All right? But for a young person who's not sure they're going to be alive in a week, because 70% of their friends have either been killed or influenced by violence in some way, it is very difficult for a young person who is an excellent student and has tremendous family support to visualize for themselves that I'm going to be around in 10 years from now. Right now, my needs are financial and just survival. I'm trying to figure out how to get from point A to point B. But yes, I want to be a doctor. Thank you very much. All right? So the health internship experiences certainly helped to demystify what the healthcare system was like and also to provide exposure to diversity of jobs. But we also had to address the issues of academics and provide some sort of academic enrichment and support remediation, however that would be to meet the young person where they are at that moment. The third piece is obviously youth leadership and development, but really this notion of advocacy, because there's an empowerment issue. We have found that if we can actually encourage a young person to learn to advocate for themselves and advocate for their community, it really does change this notion of what I can do. But I have to say the most important element of our work with youth is really the wellness and the case management piece. Because those are the determinants, those are the factors which are predominantly keeping our kids down and out of the pipeline. And so there is an intensive case management intervention process, always very much like our patient-centered focus, very youth-focused in terms of customizing our interventions according to where that young person is at. The philosophy is always meet the young person where they are at. Do not try to determine what it is, but meet the young person where they are at. And we have found that through those four the interaction of those four interventions, again, utilizing various stakeholders. So the question is, who has to be at the table? It's everybody. It's the healthcare agencies who provide the career exposure. It's the educators who we work in partnership who can inform us how best to inform classroom teaching and infuse elements of health careers training. It's the CBOs that provide the case management and the other psychosocial interventions that are needed. It's the parents who become part of that process, who hold the kids when they go home. And frankly, and most importantly, it's the young people themselves who make that transformative change. And so what we have found over the years in terms of this kind of collaborative model and collective impact model, we've served well over 1,000 kids, and 100% of them have graduated from high school. And over 90% of them have gone on to a post-secondary program, many of them in healthcare, right? But it's interesting, in terms of those who've gone on to medicine, we definitely do have some who go on to medicine, but there has been a challenge with regard to medical school because we have no control of the second level of support. We get them through high school, then they go on to the undergraduate world. And that's where the support mechanisms kind of break down. And what we hope to have is seamless transitions across those systems where we can really warmly hand off a young person to say, this young person has been mentored, this person has been supported, this person is now able to articulate what role they're going to play in healthcare. The system has been demystified for them. They understand what advocacy means, right? Mentorship has really become a health outcome, a health intervention for our young people in our work. But we have no control of what happens up the pipeline. So that's why I really advocate in terms of how we're going to do this. It really has to be unified across the systems. And frankly, the pipeline still remains quite siloed and fractured. So investment, it's a difficult question to answer because it's multifactorial, just as it is for anything we do in terms of health. I'll stop there.
All right, I'm going to stand up because I was sitting in the back and I couldn't see anyone up here. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
There's a few remarks I want to make. I think one, in terms of investment, it's awfully clear that when you think about healthcare systems, they throw all their money on recruitment. You know, you ask any recruiter how much money they get out of recruiting physicians, or you ask a health system how much money they're losing when they don't have a physician fulfilled. There's a lot of money, and that money isn't going in any way back to mentoring. So the health system has to be held accountable to help invest in mentoring. Now, yes, many of us do not have the time because we're spread so thin to be good mentors. How many of you guys are mentors? If you could just raise your hand. You mentor someone along the path or maybe did at some point. It is incredibly difficult to be a really good mentor.
We're going to try this one. Okay, let's see.
For the video?
Oh,
this
here, I'll put you on. You hold that.
Okay.
If you get interference, then I'll take care of it.
It's incredibly difficult to be a really good mentor. So if you don't have your health system investing in you to say, here, have half a day once a year to mentor, you're not going to do it. I was fortunate to have met Dr. Hayes Bautista at UCLA, Dr. Hector Flores through the Latino Medical Student Association. They were spending their weekends with us to provide us with that mentoring that we were not getting in our medical institution. So the other question is, yes, the few of us that do trickle into medical school and have incredible capacity are not being mentored by our own medical institutions. Why? Because they don't look like us. Right? Most of us only mentor where we're comfortable. I love mentoring Latinos. Why? Because I'm a Latino, right? Because I understand the struggle, I understand the story. It's very familiar to me. But I have to push myself not only to mentor men, but to mentor women, to mentor people in other genders, even if I don't know them. But many of our colleagues do not do that, right? NIH is fully responsible for funding, and until now, they're starting to say, oh, we need diversity. We need Latinos. Dr. Moreno was my mentor when I was a clinical scholar at UCLA. And they want to put us in every possible grant out there. And there's only a few of us, right? And then somehow we have to show up to all these meetings, right? And then we're supposed to mentor. And so part of it is, the system is fully rigged not to allow us to mentor. And we're not holding anyone who is really at the top, right? Money. And where that's federal money, state money, money that goes into our healthcare system that really belongs to people, to our patients, right? I mean, Medicaid isn't funded just from out of the blue, it's taxpayer money, right? So there is a case here for us to think about how to hold each other, but more importantly, the systems that we work for, right? And I'll tell you one thing, this new generation that's coming online, thanks to a lot of the efforts that started with the Chicano civil rights movement, is that these newer generations are going to start voting with their decision as to where they're going to work. And so if Kaiser, UC, whatever system, or FQAC, if you're not investing in mentoring, they're not going to want to work for you. Okay? That's coming. I see it. I've already seen it. And the part of the main reason that there's also a lot of resistance in terms of medical schools For example, and I'll give you an example of Davis, but this is happening all over all the UC campuses, is that what happens when you start allowing more minorities to come to medical school? UC Davis entering class, 40% of our students are minorities. What happens when you start having that many those many minorities in medical school? It's a real challenge. There's not enough mentors, and the people that are there don't want to mentor. But even more importantly, we start demanding that our UCs see Medicaid patients, right? You guys have read the stories. A lot of our students are putting a lot of pressure on our systems, as we are, to be held accountable to our communities. We don't just want to see the affluent person who comes in for an organ transplant. We also want to see the young, undocumented Latino who's our tío, or whoever who has diabetes that was never taken care of, who needs a transplant. We want them to get a transplant as well, right? So you start doing the math, and it doesn't make sense to them, right? So again, it's holding accountability. Mentoring is really a movement, and I'm going to share a little bit later about Mi Mentor. I just came back from the Latino Medical Student Association, this National Association Health Policy meeting in DC, and there was 200 Latinos there from all over the country. Powerful meeting, having a lot of the same discussions we're having here today, and talking about how do we hold our federal government accountable to the needs of our communities. So whether you want to accept it or not, this is happening, and there are tremendous challenges, as Dr. Magaña pointed out, but the few of us that have made it into these leadership positions aren't going to stop. And our motto through Alliance and Mentorship is together. If you look at a lot of our programming, it's together we're stronger, together we mentor, because we can't do it alone. Okay, so thank you.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Mic as well, the second mic. We're recording on the demo. Okay, here we go. Pocket, we're in the pocket.
Good morning. So my name is Gerardo Moreno. So I grew up in the Central Valley. So anybody out here from the Central Valley, from Merced County, that's still where my heart is, even though I've been in Los Angeles for quite a bit now. So I want to pick up on what the other two panelists said about accountability and sort of where, who we have to hold accountable. And so I think some, during my training, during my fellowship, something that sort of always motivated me is the question of how do we hold academic medical centers accountable? How do we hold the leadership accountable? And so that's sort of been the driving passion for me to seek leadership positions at the academic medical centers like UCLA. And so now finally, a couple of months ago, I became director of the PRIME program, the program in medical education at UCLA. And so this program is a 5-year dual degree, concurrent degree at UCLA. So the students come in and do a master's and their MD at the same time. Takes them about 5 years. And the focus is for students that have a demonstrated commitment to underserved communities. And so we have 18 students per year at UCLA. And so all UC campuses have a PRIME program. And so now me coming into the PRIME program, for me, it's a great opportunity to engage you to help me and help the PRIME students and the future students that want to come into PRIME, etc., and to really push the envelope of what PRIME really is. And so for me, thinking about what PRIME is, it's a great program. Obviously the outcomes are really amazing. It's increasing diversity at the UC medical centers. But then how do we take that to the next level? And I think one of the things that Dr. Talamantes touched on is the mentorship within the academic medical centers. And in PRIME programs, they're going to get a master's, so they're going to get this new skill set of a master's in public health. And how do we harness the mentorship from leaders like you and inspiring leaders to support the PRIME students and other students coming through the medical schools into, so they can have the option of, going into leadership positions, or knowing how or what the path could be in going into leadership positions. And so one of the first calls that I got as a prime student was from somebody in the longitudinal preceptorship at UCLA, and says like, Dr. Moreno, we can't find enough preceptors in underserved areas, or Latino preceptors, or physicians of color for the prime students. We have 6 students who we can't find a preceptor, and we don't want to send them to the Med Plaza at UCLA. And I was like, yes, we don't want to send them to the Med Plaza at UCLA. So that's why I'm excited here to sort of connect with you too, because my motto is to form a core faculty of prime physicians, to hook them up with students on innovative ways like longitudinal preceptorships, and find ways to get faculty, adjunct faculty appointments, and make it part of the system, part of the leadership. And so I think that the students, kind of get engaged and to see sort of what other physicians of color are doing out in the community. And so by far at UCLA, prime accounts for the a vast majority of the African American and Latino students at UCLA. And so with the prime students, and I think as we think about mentoring, the Magana talked about adolescents and high school, Dr. Talamantes about I think did the battery go out? About Mi Mentor and undergraduate and medical school. And so I think in medical school, one of the key drivers, I think, in sort of passion, what we want to do is equip the medical students with the skills necessary to sort of navigate all the options that they have. Not be afraid to send Dr. Hernandez an email and say, can I meet with you? Dr. Gaxiola, can I meet with you? You're paying tuition. This is what I tell my students. You're paying tuition, and you have a right to email every professor, on that roster. Good for you. Because they tell me, well, are they going to respond? And I'm like, of course they're going to respond. They're faculty, and you got to be assertive and email people and get in front of people and talk to people. And so that's part of the skill set that we're trying to build, and trying to make them think about sort of what's in it for them. Because like Dr. Talamante said, in the academic medical center, you get pulled in many different directions. There's a committee here, there's a committee there, and they want you to attend this committee and that committee. And I think as a student, one thing we're going to start teaching the students is, from the get-go, start asking, what's in it for me? If they get, every medical student in prime has to do a summer research program. If the faculty, they get approached by faculty and they get asked, do you want to come be part of my study? You can help me recruit, Latino patients and make my, patient pool more diverse. Well, I tell the students, that's fine, but ask him what's in it for me. What are you going to get? Am I going to be on that publication? Am I going to, what's going to be for me? You're not a research assistant, you're a medical student, and you got to think of, that mindset of transitioning into a leader, because as we heard in the morning, 5% of physicians in California are Latinos, and so, everybody, they're going to be leaders whether, they like it or not. And so our job in the academic medical centers is to prepare them and give them the skill set. So that's what I see prime. But I need, everybody's help here, because, I don't want my students to be in the Med Plaza at UCLA doing their preceptorship. The last thing I think that I'll touch on is that, we need the help of the legislators, of the leaders, in the different positions, the foundations, etc., to keep putting the pressure on the academic medical centers. Because I think there needs to be some more resources, as Dr. Talamante said, as the enrollment increases, there's a lot of need, and there's a lot of need for mentorship, more faculty, minority faculty at the UCs. I mean, the numbers are dismal across all UCs. And I think, one thing as I was thinking about your meeting, Dr. Hernandez, with the deans, is, how do you get FT money that is designated for things like this, where they improve diversity? I mean, there's a lot of money in the UCs. I would say they don't have money, and my boss isn't here, so he's not going to fire me. But there's a lot of money being allocated for precision medicine, for genetics, and all that is great and important. And it doesn't take a lot to increase the resources at a UC. It really doesn't. And I think we need to hold the University of California more accountable for how they're spending their money and making sure that some of that money is designated to mentoring, diversity, the faculty, the fellowship programs, the summer experiences. But I think the faculty need help from outside pressure, from the outside leaders. And I think that's one thing I think that in the dean's office it's asking them, what are you guys doing to sustain the prime programs, for example. At UCLA, the UCLA invests in probably more than other UCs in prime program, but other UCs don't. Some don't fund the masters, and so there's this whole thing that they don't want to invest. They want to say, they have a prime program, but they don't invest. And so I think sort of what are the UCs, challenging them and saying, how are you really investing? So how, what are you investing? It's not, sometimes they get a program and they label it a certain thing, but they're not really putting their, the effort and their funding into it. So I think at the academic medical center, I think we got to be relentless in the pressure. And so in my new role, I'm looking forward to working with and meeting with Dr. Raul Ruiz and Dr. Arambula in Fresno, and really kind of letting them know about these issues at the UC level.
Great. So yeah, what we're going to try to do now, I think that stimulated a lot of ideas, or hopefully has stimulated some ideas and questions from the audience. And I'm going to have Sophia, my beautiful assistant, come with some candy. I'll wake you guys all up. So take some candy to the children. But any questions that we have right now? Anything that you've heard that has struck a chord?
I don't need a mic. Dr. Magana, you mentioned that we've got these programs at high school, then we have programs in medical school, but they're not connected. So any observations about how we more systematically and intentionally link up these programs? Not only for those of us who are trying to support them, but also people who are trying to access them. Because my sense is that if you're in Oakland,
That's right.
you're in those schools, you get your mentorship program.
Absolutely.
And maybe you get into prime at some point. But the connectivity between these pipeline programs, I'd love your thoughts on.
Yeah. Did you all hear that? Just in terms of connectivity across the pipeline programs. And there's been a lot of discussion in the coalitions and pipeline programs about specifically how to do that. Because once again, it seems we're all working in parallel and very siloed, and one young person completes one element and then gets stuck in that transition. So there has been everything from a discussion to something very clearly articulated agreements that for young people who are identified as graduates of high school pipeline programs, that there is, that the admissions committees at the higher level really give them preferential consideration, in the sense that these young people have been trained both in terms of soft skills and professional skills and academic that warrant some specific consideration. And we had that somewhat with UC Berkeley several years ago, where there was an admissions counselor there who worked very closely with us and was very clear about the kind of work that we were doing in terms of preparing them for up the pipeline. And while she couldn't specifically say we pulled them out of the pile, there was certainly a way to say, please give us some notification that this young person has benefited from a pipeline program. But it's articulation also, of course, across programs as well. So not just in terms of post-secondary educational pieces, but there are internship programs like Health Career Connection and so forth that will provide that kind of ongoing professional development internships at the college level. And you can very specifically articulate in that application if you are a graduate of one of the pipeline programs. Again, then trying to really connect those dots. But really, it comes from collaborative discussion, bringing all of those stakeholders together and really kind of building seamless ways of connection. To what extent can we let me give you an example of something that has come up recently in terms of an innovative idea with regard to nursing. So one of our faculty at San Luis University really understands the problem with the high school to nursing, right, up the pipeline disconnect. And she has proposed a 6-year nursing program where the actual nursing program starts within the junior year of high school, right? In the sense that the interventions with regard to nursing mentoring, some of the theory classes that are taught by the school are actually taught at the high school level. And there's some dual enrollment possibilities that provide academic credit that meet some of the prerequisites to get into nursing programs. Now that's really thinking outside the box. It's really thinking outside the box. But when you're expecting young people to kind of stick through that 6 to 8 year transition up into medicine and nursing, you have to build that overlap. Because inevitably young people are going to get lost through all of that. And so, it's, like I said, it's everything from innovative, outside the box type of programming, to articulation agreements, to overlap in mentoring and support, right? To really thinking, kind of reframe what it means to be in a nursing track or a medicine track, because it really is simply just 4 years of high school, 4 years of college, and then 4 years of medical school. Or are we talking now kind of a 12-year pipeline, you know, kind of along the medicine or healthcare arena? None of us have really quite figured it out yet. We're really still trying. There's a lot of thoughts and innovation around it, and there's some great places like Coachella Valley, I think, that are doing some great work in terms of that innovation. But we're still working on that. Can I address something quickly about the mentoring piece, though? We're throwing mentoring out a lot, right? And there's this kind of sense that we're all in agreement what mentoring means. And I don't think that that's the case by any stretch. And I think that is often the reluctance for healthcare providers, particularly physicians, to say, no, I really don't have the time for this because it just doesn't fit within my busy schedule, because they have a notion of what that means. And the truth is that there are very differing elements to what mentoring means. There's the structural barriers we have to deal with, most profoundly, particularly for many of our kids of color, it's the emotional barriers, which are some of the most destructive for young people. So yes, there are access issues. Can you get clinical experience, which is important for medical school? That's an issue of privilege. We don't always have that privilege. I certainly didn't grow up asking my mom if I can shadow her at the hospital or my friend, you know? No, I had to work. And so that notion of getting that kind of exposure was not within my frame of reality, number one. So if a mentor can certainly provide that level of access and exposure, that is important, but that is not where it stops. Because the challenge I have found in young people, and particularly young people of color, is they have a very difficult time articulating their value, right? It is extraordinary how many times I've had high school students and college students struggle with an essay on leadership and how they exemplify that. Because their frame of reference is, well, I never had time to be president, I never really could do after-school sports, and I really couldn't do clubs because I was working 3 jobs and taking care of my 5 siblings while my mom and dad worked. Okay? And that piece of paper is blank, even though they've gone through it all. And they don't articulate all of that as leadership because they come from often such a deficit-based model. How do we refer to our kids? At risk, disadvantaged, right? Minority, marginalized. The messaging we internalize as Latinos sometimes, and as folks of color, go deep, not to mention kind of the biases we receive and the microaggressions we receive going up this pipeline. It is powerful. So one of the deepest work and most powerful work in terms of mentoring has to be to train our young people going up the pipeline to articulate for others and for themselves the value my lived experience brings to this profession. Right? This is why you need me. Because I am resourceful, I'm innovative, I can problem solve, right? You need me to multitask, I got that, because I've been doing it my whole life. And that's what the profession needs. Not only do I have a sense of what the community needs are and the challenges are and our disparities, but I know how to resolve them. Because I've lived them, and I've worked it. And so we have found a huge transformative change when we have focused on allowing you to articulate their value. and to articulate how their lived journey and lived experiences create value to the profession. And my last thing, I'll keep on going, I'm sorry. If you look at the global health workforce, so we do a lot of work in global health pathways. The global health sector, terrible diversity, terrible diversity. And they are struggling even more so than we are in medicine on how to diversify that. You look at the competencies that the USAID and other organizations have determined makes the ideal global health worker. What are they? Communication, innovation, resourcefulness, all the things that exemplify the young people I work with because they do it on a daily basis. Right? So we're telling the global health workforce, this is the workforce you want to work with because they already got the skill set. You don't have to teach them this. And that's what we need to do in terms of our medical schools. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, I'm just going to give a couple, and I know there's some questions that, I think there's some ingredients in these programs, both FACES and PRIME and some of the work that UC Davis is doing around diversity that does need to be scaled. And it does need to be sort of more of the norm than the exception. And I think that too often we get pigeonholed into having, oh, well, that's the PRIME program and it's this big. And that's because there's a limited supply, right? There's not enough demand for it, but that's not necessarily true. California is the #1 exporter of pre-meds, and I would say if I can get my hands on the data, I would say that the majority of our Latinos are actually leaving the state. Okay, and I get to meet them. I was at UIC. They have a Hispanic Center of Excellence, where almost 50% of their class is minority. The majority are Latinos. And they graduate and end up in their residency programs. Chicago has a robust set of residency programs where the chairs, the faculty look like the population coming in. So you're going to want to be in these systems because you know you're going to be successful. You're going to be the next chair. You see that path every day. So there are best practices across the country. There's best practices here in California. How do we scale those up with the support of the universities, of foundations, LPOC? This is a prime interest of us and why we're so dedicated to this, because we see this every day. So I think there's two things. I think there's the opportunities to scale up, and then the other is to link them all up. And we haven't made serious investments in technology. When we first started Alliance and Mentorship, I think there's a couple of founders here, a few maybe. If you guys could stand up. Alliance and Mentorship. Don't be afraid. All right. In 2012, we started with $1,000 each. We, I think, raised about $8,000. There's several other people who aren't here today, but here in spirit. And we decided to invest on a website, a community, a mentoring community. And people said, well, what's this website? Oh, it should be this, it should be that, or it's not good enough, this and that. We got about 2,700 people to sign up in the last few years. We're actually launching our app. We're going to give you guys a little preview in a few. But with that money that we invested, those few $1,000s, we then competed for a national innovations grant from Voto Latino, not even a health agency. And they gave us the seed money to launch this app. Through this app, and we already have people from New York, from Chicago, from DC, from all over the country telling us they want to come back to California because they're our own pre-med students that have left. And they want a spot in residency. So there's a demand argument here for us to also get it together in California. Hopefully we don't leave all these other states without doctors. But there are so many of us who are leaving, and it doesn't have to be that way. So there's an opportunity for linkage, and it's got to be through technology. Through Alliance and Mentorship, we don't provide direct mentoring services as much as we do link people with programs like FACES to make sure they know about programs like PRIME. The majority of people don't even know anything. You ask them, for example, just to give you one, what is Ultimed? I don't know. Where is Ultimate? I don't know. It's the largest FQAC in the whole country. Primarily serves all Latino patients. Why don't enough of us know about it? Right? Again, everyone is working in these silos and no one knows about each other's program. And so there is, again, no visualization of what the next step's going to be. So through this technology, having an app where you can go on it anytime from anywhere, any place, and be able to share the resources. You may not have the time. Maybe you can make an investment, or if you don't have the time to actually come to an event, you may promote an event and say, hey, I can't mentor you as much as you should go to the LPOC Symposium. We should have another 100 people here, right? We're in LA, I mean, for crying out loud. So we have to continue to invest in technology to be able to get the word out of what's really happening and the potential people have to be successful.
So one thing, I'll share something with the students. So I used to live in Huntington Park for about 7 years by the high school. So awesome that you connected with the pediatrician, because I know firsthand how it is. My wife's from Huntington Park. I think that connected is, I don't got much to add because I think, like Determinants put it on, I think we got to be innovative and look at the technology. I think, otherwise it's just too hard, and we won't be able to really keep up with all the different programs, especially at the prime level. We're also looking forward to the residency, because I think at the residency, a lot of the residencies programs at the academic medical centers at least are just dismal in diversity. I think the medical schools, if you think the medical school enrollment is bad, you should see the numbers for residencies at the academic medical centers. I mean, those are, and we always forget about those, but that's some of the things that at the prime we're also looking to even connect it further to residency, and sort of how do we continue that ladder from all the way to residency.
And I'll just, as a program director for the residency program, Latinos aren't the only ones that don't pass step 1 or 2 or whatever. And I'll tell you that I get emails from other program directors saying, hey, so-and-so didn't pass, can you, take another look at their application? And we're happy to. But they tend to be non-Latinos, the ones that we're getting requests for. So I would say, again, the fact that no one's advocating for us when we don't pass the silly test, when we have so much potential, is, again, that we don't have effective mentors, right? So if you want to think about mentoring, these are people who are going on saying, hey, Efrain, you need to reconsider and look at this application, please. And what do we decide as a group for this candidate who's actually, again, non-minority, non-Latino? We're going to bring him to interview. We want to meet him because every single comment was off the charts. But somehow he got lost in the shuffle. I mean, there's thousands of applications. So, again, mentoring could be more than just, a letter of rec. It could be calling people, and you have people in this room who are in different places to be advocates for you. So.
Great. Any questions? Yes.
Yeah, I just wondered, do you think it's counterproductive or productive strategically to keep us in these silos with Latinos over here, African Americans over here, Asians over there? How can we come together? We all the same issue. You can have this be an all black doctor panel here.
It's exact same.
And I also, I have right now I have about 36 students from UCLA, USC, and Irvine, African American students now who are begging for mentorship. We're gonna have a big kickoff. They're gonna get a big culture shock when I tell them, hey, most of your patients are gonna be Hispanic. So these kids need to understand the Latino culture, these African American kids, and the same way, what's the difference now between a Latino doctor seeing predominantly Latino patients and a black physician like I did for the last 40 years, predominantly Latino patients. My patients were Latino. So it's very mixed, and so I'm here to really try to beg us, how can we come together? I'm with LAGMA, I'm with the National Medical Association, I belong to both of them, and we're trying to get together some kind of mentorship strategy, right. And I need you guys to come together, because it's not black and brown anymore. Right. It's us, and I got to emphasize that.
Let me just comment. Yeah, I would say that a lot of the reason that we get siloed that way is actually it's the academic medical center, like the health system academic medical centers, because they make us all feel like we're competing for the same resource, and we do. You know, asking people for $5,000, I mean, and they say no. You ain't organized enough. You ain't got it together enough. You know, you need to put out this. You need to do that. And I mean, there's a lot of that. So yeah, there's a huge case for us to unite and say, you know what? We don't just want 5,000. We want 5 million to address this issue, right? So that's the case. The other thing I would say is that if you can imagine a diversity dashboard where every health system, medical school is held accountable to something, right? Just like they want to hold us accountable for step 1, step 2, step whatever, we need to hold them accountable to make sure that their schools are keeping up with diversity. And if they're not, there's got to be consequences, right? And so a lot of this, you know, I can go out on a limb and tell you right now that the majority of medical students that get into med school can take step 1 and 2 without taking 1 day of class and pass that damn thing. Medical schools are lazy. They don't teach you anything new. Now, yes, as a Latino, you're coming in, this is the first time you ever really had a chance to learn medicine, right? And then they expect us to pass when every subpar elementary, high school education, and even struggling through undergrad, that's supposed to get us all the way to level the playing field, and then we're judged by these residency programs. No. So medical schools need to do more for us. And if they don't invest in good mentorship, I mean, if Gerardo wasn't my mentor, I would tell you, I would not be where I'm at. I wouldn't be in academics. I wouldn't be working with Sergio today. So a lot of what we need is holding these systems accountable. And students are more powerful. I always tell my medical students I mentor, you're more powerful to the medical schools than we are, because they're just saying, well, you guys are just trying to vie for more resources. Yeah, of course you want a job in an FTE and all these things. Yeah, and we do, because we need them. But medical students, you can demand. You're paying tuition, right? Get 10 medical students together. How much money does that equate to a medical school? $1 million, right? Probably more, right? Now get 20, 30, 40, hundreds. Now you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars on the line if medical schools don't respond. That's what you're talking about. How do we come together and bring that many people to hold these systems accountable?
Can I say something on that?
So as a practicing physician for 31 years, I think that one of the studies that has never been done by the medical school is looking at the benefit of the students that came under affirmative action, you know, and basically what we have given back to the community, and that's not just in so many ways. I have won, I mean, my organization, which right now where I work is, we have been Clinical Excellence Award for the last 2 years. I worked in Minnesota for 8 years, Clinical Excellence Award, solo practitioner. But I think that this is really lacking, is getting some feedback. It's not like because you had a 7.8 or 4.0 that there's been a difference in what we bring back, but it's something that they don't, it doesn't look at, to claim us as a success that we are. I think that's a really important thing for the medical schools, and for us to sort of bring back to them is that we haven't been failures for them, we've been successes. And these successes we're getting beyond now. We are going into the retirement age, and what are they going to do now? So I don't know how we can sort of bring that to the forefront, but I think it's really important. The more I think about it all the time, I think, you know, no one's ever asked me in terms of what have you accomplished?
You know, there's this notion that we're often celebrated, but we're not valued, right? And so there's organizations that are quick to celebrate their diversity numbers and their efforts, but when it comes down to true value in terms of organizational structure, it kind of falls flat. And part of that comes from, I believe, to an extent that there has not been a lot of diligence in really understanding the value of diversity and what it brings to a profession and to an organization. Now, there's some extraordinary businesses that have shown the financial impact of diversity, how it improves organizational structures, how it brings in innovative thinking to enhance strategy and so forth. I don't know to what extent those arguments, which have happened in the business sector, have actually extended into the academic arena. Right? We're still kind of playing the same old song over and over and over again. Now, I'm all about organizational accountability. There's no doubt about that. The problem is that when an organization says, okay, we'll be accountable, what's pretty much the next plan of action? Well, they delegate it to those champions who've been doing it for all along. Right? And so we consistently have the same players overwhelmed, those of us here at the table, who step up and do it because we're committed to the value, but really, what are we talking about in terms of incentives? Right? What are the organizational incentives that allow others to participate fully without bearing the burden of all the other stuff that they do? Is this part of the tenure track package? Is diversity in these efforts? Frankly, it isn't for many organizations, right? Or other faculty who don't quite get it but can play a role. So, I mean, it's accountability both at the organizational level and the individual level and the department level. And really clear metrics on how your performance is going to be measured in terms of contributing to this effort.
We have another question.
Well, it's a question, and I'd also like to add to the retirees that are retirees to be. I'd like to remind everyone that EOP was a success. Affirmative action was a success. And being part of the middle of affirmative action, I forget the exact years, I can tell you there were a few people who didn't pass step 1 or 2, but 20% of the first year class at San Francisco UCSF did not pass. It was the medical boards part 1 at that time. So that's a lot of people, and they were not all people of color. It was actually another program that were here, Kaplan, that helped most of the people that I knew get through on the first time. And the problem with Kaplan is, at that time it was $1,000, and where were we going to get the money to go to Kaplan? So there is no shame in not passing the first step, but we probably have to plan ahead if Dr. Baker says that's an issue. It's an issue. We have to deal with it in advance. But that's not what I really wanted to ask. The thing I really wanted to ask is we have papers that show that populations that are cared for by Spanish-speaking, culturally competent physicians do better as far as the metrics, NCQA metrics, compliance on diabetes, that stuff exists, that literature exists. There's a big reason for us to recruit people of color and all of us. It works, and we're going to help that population, and it's a huge population. Now, when we were at one time in the front lines, I'm from Kaiser Permanente and was sat on the board for 15 years in Southern California. When we were looking for recruitment, and I haven't been there for a few years, we were very, very keened in on hiring Latino physicians for that reason, because that was our population that we had to take care of. And it works, and the papers are there, it's all there. It's a business model. Mm-hmm. Our stumbling block was the academic model. We know who held our accountability, our patients who pay our bills, who paid my mortgage, our members in our health plan. But who the heck holds UCSF accountable? Who holds UCLA accountable? I mean, directly accountable. The only person I know who was a student who went to the legislature was Frank Mesa. As a medical student, and cost UC Davis, because that's where he went, a few $1 million in a library at that time, because they were not being responsive. Actually, they were, in retrospect, they were more responsive than they are now. And I'm not sure that we have a mechanism, and Hector, I agree, we are all responsible for this, but we need a little more leadership in how we're going to be responsible, and a little bit more homing in on exactly what we're going to home into. This is one of the best symposiums I've seen, and Jose, you've done a great job organizing. And for the panel, I say, what's our next target?
Next
Maybe
steps.
we could just keep going. Well, we're going to incorporate, because I want to hear from more people.
I'm sorry.
That's a
There's
tough
so
question,
many-
too.
There's just so many wonderful, great things that were said. I'm going to just try to focus on a couple of them. So one is going back to the fact of the data that you talk about actually exists. It hasn't been published, and perhaps we can get some help in terms of publishing data. And that data is looking at value rather than deficit. So why do we go, people of color, why do they go into medicine? They're more likely to go into medicine in order to provide care for the communities from where they came. Other people go into medicine to be doctors. We go into medicine, whether it's Central Valley, whether it's African American, whether it's Latino, we go in with that explicit purpose of doing that. Now, sometimes that's misinterpreted. I will tell you, I will talk to some of my colleagues. They think that we go there because we're not good enough to be where they're at. Why aren't you in Beverly Hills? Why aren't you making a lot? Why aren't you in the Med Plaza? Why aren't you doing that? Oh, you go back, you were in those. No, but I think, though, most of the people here, we, with explicit purpose of doing that. Now, why is that important? Because that's important because that provides value. When we talk about maldistribution, who addresses the maldistribution? When there are two candidates, one candidate, a person of color, and one not, the person of color actually has greater value because from a societal perspective, they're the individual that will go to that community where they're most needed. So that's value. We never talk about that. And we actually need to publish that. The data's there, it's clear, so it's something of value.
Well, Kaiser did publish
Yeah,
it at New England Journal
yes.
on diabetes outcomes.
Well, no, it's two separate things. Or do they provide care that it's a more value to that community? Yes, but I'm just talking just physically saying that I will be practicing in the valley, I will be practicing in the inner city, I'll be practicing in those places that other people don't particularly want to practice. And when they get there, they provide care that is of greater benefit. That's two separate things. Then the other thing, again, I'll go back. Holding accountable. Again, without the data, we can't hold them accountable. We need to hold them accountable. If we go back to UC, and again, UC, I'm not taking Stanford or USC or any of these great institutes off the hook. But why I say UC, because UC is a public institution, right? Public responsibility. And we know that, where do you practice? You practice where you do your residency. And if we go to the residencies, those numbers are abysmal. If we think that the medical school stuff is abysmal, and you guys all know, it's an elite system. It's an elite system. In fact, they measure themselves, well, I won't go that far, but they measure themselves in statistics that make it look elite, right? So it's to their best interest not to have individuals that we might think should contribute best to the community.
Okay.
There's a couple more. You can just go to the back.
Thank you. Good luck to you, Sophia. Go Mighty Rams.
Yay, okay.
All right. Wanted to just follow up on Dr. Baker's comment. I think what we need to do is we have a lot of collective knowledge here, and we really need to take time to start writing down really important case studies that will drive policy. We always talk about evidence-based medicine. We need evidence-based policy making. To me, Kaiser Permanente is a great case study of an organization, as Tina described, that took in 1992, they took it seriously to be accountable to their members. And it helped that the unions were, keeping them honest and pushing the issue. But they adopted it and integrated it into their very DNA. And our mutual friend, Ricardo Sistos, really was the catalyst for the Hippocrates Circle, which is really LMSA reinvented as Kaiser. And I'm impressed how many students now I see today, and I would suspect Sophia as well, that Kaiser in their DNA already. And that's a case study that we need to really emulate. Sandra and I sat on the Blue Shield Board of California, and when she moved on to the California Healthcare Foundation, I stayed on and we recruited Helen Duplessis, who's equally minded in terms of where we need to take that Kaiser message and chain the other health plans into making similar investments. so that we don't have to be worried about the future of the programs that we have. That's one important case study. The second case study of many is the PRIME program. You know, many of you in the room know Dr. Alberto Manetta. He was the visionary who designed the PRIME program at UC Irvine. And it didn't happen by accident. It was him gathering up his resources. Dr. David Hayes Bautista and I were on his advisory board. It just so happened that a good friend of mine was Marco Firebaum, the late, great Marco Firebaum, where we realized that Alberto ran into a block wall, where the UC system said, we don't see any need for this program. We don't see that we need to set aside any money for this program. Remember, Prop 209 says you can't favor minorities. So they used all sorts of excuses to fight him. And it took us going to Marco, and Marco said, this is outrageous. The UC system gets, at that time, $500 million in disproportionate share Medi-Cal money. They get $800 million in instructional budget. All we need is 1% of each to make this program work. So I went with him to meet with the president of the university. The president said, great idea, no money for it, not a priority. So Marco says, look, let me get Jenny Oropeza, the late, great Jenny Oropeza, who was the chair of the chair of the Assembly Appropriations Committee, who on the cell phone said, I will find the money if you don't, Mr. President. And then the president found the money for it. So I think we need to understand all the different levers we need to pull. And I'm really worried that the schools are now starting to recede on their commitment to PRIME. We're coming up, in 2019 will be the 10th anniversary of the first ever PRIME graduate from UC Irvine. What a perfect opportunity to begin building up now the collective thinking amongst ourselves, getting our elected officials. You know, dish dollars now, it's almost $1 billion that the UC system gets on the Medi-Cal program. All of those levers is what we need to use to be able to sustain and expand these kinds of programs. But it is going to be up to us to make that happen, because we have the knowledge, we have the institutional memory, and we have an obligation to put it on paper and actually use that as evidence-based policy making.
Of course. Dr. Alves?
So can I just make just a time check? We have time for Jose's comment.
All right.
Okay. All right. So lunch is running a little bit late, so maybe we can have two more questions. But we really want to move on with the rest of the agenda in a few minutes. So thank you. Go ahead.
I want to thank the panel. As a former Faces of the Future college student.
Oh my God!
Dr. Magana.
Hey, Jose!
I'm now faculty at Kaiser Los Angeles Medicine, Family Medicine Residency Program. So the initial question I had for you guys was, hey, what can, you guys are academics, you guys are our leaders, and you guys are in there fighting the good fight, but you guys a lot of times are on your own. What can we do as the Latino physicians of California and our colleagues from all areas of society do to help you? I do want to address Dr. Flores, because I am within Kaiser Permanente, and I see a lot of faces here. We are doing it in case study, more on the business side from Harvard School of Law, and that's going to be published probably within about a year on sort of how we're doing it. So we are doing it. One of the things that I want to tell you, I want you to challenge us. You know, what can we do where we're at to help you? And we're all in a different sort of position. What I would want to let the people within KP here know is, remind them that in 2019 we're going to be opening up our own medical school, and we're already in the curricular phase of it, and this is where we need to both voices within Kaiser Permanente and outside Kaiser Permanente, because I think they'll be welcomed. We need to say, hey guys, you need to focus on this from the very inception. We're at the very building blocks. Like, we only have one committee up and running, which is the curriculum committee, but there will be an admissions committee, an outreach committee, and so forth and so forth. And so for those of us within Kaiser Permanente, I would challenge us to say, start from where you're at. And for us, we have this wonderful opportunity. I myself am I'm going to be a part of it now, because I was able to get myself on one of these committees. Connie Casillas will be helping me. Lisa, we're going to try to get you on, and I see other people. Sweet. So anybody within the organization, people outside the organization, we've got great minds with data that I just don't have all of that literature. And so if you can supply that so that I can then go, because I'm not in academics, at least not, you know, in your sense. I teach residency, but in terms of that kind of data, it would be very, very helpful. But what would you guys want from us to help you in your efforts?
Want to take it to the front? That other mic works, but I can run this back. It should work. This one.
I mean, I think there's a lot you know that you can do. Number one is you know, when we get speakers like Raul Ruiz, Joaquin Aramula, and just keep reminding them of the message. You know, they have a lot of competing demands in Sacramento, and there's always that demand to take care of Fresno first, etc. And you know, being from the Central Valley, I mean, I understand that, but I think, you know, constantly reminding them of sort of the bigger picture also, and like Dr. Flores mentioned, the small amount of funding that it would take to sustain, you know, the overall picture of the pie for the UC funding, etc., of what it takes to fund some of these programs and expand them and keep them robustly going. I think that because medical education is changing a lot as the healthcare delivery changes. A lot of medical students now are getting masters, taking a year off. So then, you know, it's not long before a medical administrator starts thinking, well, why prime then if everybody's getting a master's? And so I think we need to think about what sort of the future lies as healthcare delivery and the health system change. You know, how do these programs have to change out also and adapt to it, and kind of go back to the roots of how things like Prime started, and get involved politically, and maybe with the LPOC is trying to figure out how do we get constituents to write to the folks in Sacramento. You know, that's one area that I think, as Prime Director, that I'm seeing in the future is, you know, sort of the barrier to potentially expanding it and building on Prime to not only focus on admissions, but then, you know, going forward, residency leadership, etc.
Yeah, I would say Kaiser is a perfect model. I mean, you guys have disrupted healthcare. Everybody's trying to be Kaiser. Some of us want to be Kaiser as well. So I think you could be truly disruptive. I think you need to take away that medical education model that currently exists and just completely throw it to the trash and rebuild it by thinking about what kind of physician do you want to have take care of your patients, right? What are the attributes aside from just, you know, focusing on standardized testing? You have it because you will have the opportunity to start with Hippocrates Circle, you know, all the way through, you know, community college. Be inclusive, don't be exclusive, don't be elitist. These are where our community is. And then, instead of wasting people's time studying for MCAT, it's a total waste of time, get them to actually study something that's meaningful, that's going to result in better patient outcomes, right? I worked with Kaiser docs when I was here in LA, and most of them that weren't making partner because they could care less about people. They didn't have that EQ to really connect, to really convince their patients that taking their medications was important. And most of them were non-minorities, I'll tell you. And I felt really bad because I'm like, these are really smart people who got really high scores, and I'm sorry, they're not making the cut. I mean, that's how do we help them, right? As you're saying, how do we help our colleagues who are going to suffer if their abuelita is not going to listen to them because they want Dr. Talamantes to take care of them, right? And that happens a lot. So I think there is a real opportunity to be disruptive.
I'll just say real quickly, the first thing that comes to my mind is this notion that act locally with intention and bravery, think globally. Kaiser has a tremendous footprint in the state of California as well as certainly nationally. There is outcomes, process, impact that can be measured through your thoughtful process that can be used to inform other stakeholders to think differently in terms of how they do things. If information, data impact can be articulated clearly, that empowers me then to go to our children's hospital, right, or the other hospitals where there are residency programs and say, look, here is a case study, as Dr. Flores said, right, of where there's really significant impact being made that is thinking outside the box. And this is the right time to do that. Can we rethink how we view students who are coming out of the Cal State system and really prioritizing them? The problem is Cal State's not right here represented at the table, and yet the majority of our Latino students are at the Cal States. This is a problem. And the data shows that a person of color gets caught in the Cal State system and the city college system for 8 years. So there is this kind of wheel that's going around, but we're not really addressing that profound barrier of it because there are major bottlenecks and barriers that are happening at that level, and yet nobody's engaging them, or very rarely engaging them in this discussion. My wife's a professor at Cal State, so I know this personally. And the biases that are being told to her students in terms of their eligibility. But if Kaiser can reframe that, then that gives us some power then. Information really would help us in that respect.
Okay. Dr. Casillas,
If I can just, we do have some problems with the lunch, but it's coming real soon. And just because we don't want to delay the rest of the presentations, because there's one more on work-life balance. It's supposed to start at 11:15. What we wanted to do was, in just this last question, and then move along with the agenda, we'll ask you to move to the exhibit hall or go to the bathroom, do whatever you need to do. Try to go to our exhibits, and we'll get you the lunch.